Can you remember the last time you were truly alone with your thoughts, without any screen flickering in your periphery, without the possibility of escaping to the digital world when reality became uncomfortable? If you can not only remember but feel nostalgic for those moments of real silence, you belong to an endangered species. More than that, you carry in your memory something that future generations will consider mythical, almost incomprehensible. You are a living bridge between two fundamentally different worlds. And this position, far from being nostalgic, places you in a unique and perhaps dangerous situation for the new system emerging around us. We are living through one of the most radical transformations in human history, and most of us don't even realize it. When we observe the great revolutions of the past, the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, we can identify them clearly because they have already passed. But in the midst of a revolution, especially one that directly attacks our perception of reality, it's almost impossible to comprehend its magnitude. The digital revolution is not just a technological change. It's a complete reformulation of what it means to exist, think, and relate to the world. To understand what's happening, we need to go back just a few decades. Imagine a world where boredom was a common and accepted experience, where standing in line at the bank, waiting for the bus, or sitting in the doctor's office simply meant being present with your own thoughts. There was no escape. There was no instant dopamine. The human brain had evolved for hundreds of thousands of years to deal with these moments of quietude, to process experiences, to daydream, to simply be. This capacity to be with oneself, which our ancestors considered as natural as breathing, has today become a superpower that's almost impossible to develop. Those who lived in that world not only remember it, but carry in their bodies the memory of how it's possible to exist without digital mediation. You are like survivors of a species that developed the ability to breathe underwater, while the rest of humanity is learning to live permanently submerged. And here's the crucial point that needs to be understood. The new system doesn't just prefer that you don't exist, it's actively working to make your form of existence obsolete and eventually impossible. Screens are not just tools, they are portals to a new form of consciousness, an interface that is literally rewiring our brains. Each swipe, each notification, each moment of fragmented attention is sculpting new neural patterns. Neuroplasticity, that wonderful capacity of the brain to adapt and change, is being utilized to create a new species of human, one who can no longer exist without constant digital stimulation. Observe the children who were born already immersed in this world. They didn't choose screens. They were molded by them from before they developed language. For them, the idea of being alone with their own thoughts is not just uncomfortable, it's literally unthinkable. It's like trying to explain to a fish what it's like to breathe air. Their brains developed in a fundamentally different architecture where scattered attention and instant gratification are not addictions, but rather the natural state of functioning. You who remember the previous world possess something that no amount of money or technology can buy, the visceral experience that an alternative form of existence exists. At the deepest level, that it's possible to be present, that it's possible to have thoughts, that develop slowly, that it's possible to feel complete without constant external validation. You are living proof that the current state of things is not inevitable, natural, or permanent. But here's where the situation becomes complex and potentially dangerous. The new system needs everyone to believe that there is no alternative, that digital life is not a choice, but rather the only possible way to exist in the modern world. You, simply by existing and remembering, are a threat to this narrative. You are evidence that another world is possible, and this is profoundly subversive. See how the system deals with this threat. First, through subtle marginalization. Those who resist hyperconnectivity are labeled as Luddites, nostalgics, people who can't adapt to progress. The dominant narrative is that resistance to technology is a form of immaturity, an inability to accept reality. Second, through the creation of dependencies that make participation in the digital world not just desirable, but apparently necessary to function in society. Try today to get a job, maintain relationships, access basic services, or even navigate cities without a smartphone. The system has been structured so that participation in digital life is not optional. But here is what few realize. This was not a natural evolution, it was a deliberate construction. The dependency was designed, it didn't arise organically. When we observe this transformation through the lens of history, we perceive familiar patterns. All great technological changes created generational divides, but never before has a divide been as fundamental as this one. The difference between those who grew up before and after the digital revolution is not just about familiarity with tools, it's about completely different cognitive structures. Stop for a moment to feel this reality. You might be in a room full of people and be the only one who remembers how it's possible to simply be present without doing anything, without consuming content, without seeking stimulation. You carry in your mind the memory of a type of peace that is becoming extinct. It's like being the last speaker of a dying language, except that this language is an entire form of consciousness. I need to pause here to ask you something directly. When was the last time you felt that particular quality of internal silence, that sensation of being completely present without any urgency to do, consume, or produce something? If you can not only remember but miss that state, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you feel that this capacity is becoming more difficult to access, even having the memory of it, you're experiencing in real time the transformation we're discussing. Share in the comments, I miss being present when. Your experience might be what someone needs to read today to understand they're not alone in this feeling of loss. The question we need to ask is not whether this transformation is good or bad, but rather, what kind of humanity are we creating and what capacities are we losing in the process? You who remember the previous world possess empirical data about alternative forms of mental processing, of relationship with time, of experience, of reality. You are literally a living library of human possibilities that are being erased. But the situation is even more nuanced than it appears. The new system is not simply oppressive or controlling in an obvious way. It offers real benefits genuine pleasures, impressive efficiencies. Hyperconnectivity allows forms of creativity, collaboration, and access to information that would be unthinkable in the previous world. The problem is not that technology is intrinsically evil, but rather that it's creating a cognitive monoculture, eliminating the diversity of forms of consciousness. Imagine if all people in the world started speaking only one language. On one hand, communication would become more efficient. On the other, we would lose all the richness, all the diversity of ways of thinking that different languages offer. This is what's happening with our cognition. We are moving toward a single, standardized form of mental processing, optimized for interaction with digital systems. This is where you, who carry the memory of the previous world, become crucial for the future of humanity. You are not just walking nostalgia. You are guardians of cognitive capacities that may be essential for our survival as a species. The capacity to be present, to maintain sustained attention, to tolerate boredom, to process complex emotions without immediate distraction. All these skills that you develop naturally may be exactly what humanity will need when digital systems fail or when we face problems that require types of thinking that artificial intelligence cannot replicate. See the irony of the situation. While we create increasingly intelligent systems artificially, we are simultaneously diminishing our own natural intelligence. We are outsourcing our memory, our attention, our emotional processing, and even our creativity to external systems. This is not necessarily problematic as long as we maintain the capacity to function when these systems are not available. But we are losing this backup capacity. You who remember the previous world are like atrophied muscles of humanity, evidence that we possessed certain capacities that are now being lost. And atrophied muscles can be exercised again, can be strengthened, can return to function. The question is, do we want to make this effort, or are we willing to let these capacities die completely? What makes this situation particularly complex is that we are dealing with changes that affect the very basis of decision-making. How can we choose consciously about something that is altering our capacity to choose consciously? It's like trying to think critically about a process that is constantly interrupting our critical thinking. Here enters the fundamental importance of those who still maintain access to alternative forms of cognition. You are like canaries in the coal mine, capable of detecting subtle changes that those totally immersed in the new system cannot perceive. You can see the transformation happening because you have a point of comparison. But with this capacity also comes responsibility. You cannot simply isolate yourselves or live nostalgically in the past. Humanity needs you as translators, as bridges, as guardians of possibilities that cannot be lost. This doesn't mean rejecting technology, but rather ensuring that it is integrated in a way that preserves essential cognitive diversity. The true revolution will not be technological, but rather conscious. It will be the deliberate decision to maintain and cultivate human capacities that are not optimized for digital systems. It will be the intentional creation of spaces, time, and practices that allow different forms of consciousness to flourish. Think about this. We are creating a world where the capacity to be present, to have patience, to tolerate uncertainty And to process complex emotions without immediate escape is becoming as rare as any other specialized skill. These capacities may soon need to be taught deliberately, like we learn foreign languages or musical instruments. And here's a surprising insight. The future may depend not on who best adapts to the new system, but on who can maintain capacities that the new system is eliminating. When we face crises that cannot be solved by algorithms, when we need creativity that comes from boredom, wisdom that comes from slow reflection, resilience that comes from the capacity to be alone with oneself, it will be to you that humanity will need to turn. The question we should ask is not how to adapt completely to the new system, but how to keep alive the cognitive diversity that may be essential for our future. You who remember the previous world are not relics of the past. You are seeds of the future, carriers of possibilities that may be crucial when we least expect it. What we are witnessing is not just a technological change, it's a cognitive speciation. We are dividing into different types of humans with fundamentally different mental capacities, and as in any evolutionary process, diversity is essential for survival. A species that becomes excessively specialized for a specific environment becomes vulnerable when that environment changes. Imagine if all birds in the world adapted perfectly to live only in dense forests and completely lost the ability to fly in open spaces. When forests began to disappear, the entire species would be threatened. Something similar may be happening to us. We are cognitively specializing for a digital environment, but losing capacities that may be essential in different contexts. You who carry the memory of alternative forms of consciousness are like birds that still know how to fly in different types of sky. You keep alive the possibility of adaptation when the environment changes again. And it will change, because environments always change, especially those built by technologies that evolve exponentially. The central question is not to romanticize the past or blindly resist the future, but rather to consciously navigate this transformation while preserving what is essential about human experience. This requires a clear understanding of both what we are gaining and what we are losing, both the opportunities and the risks. When we look back in history, we see that the most resilient societies were those that managed to integrate new capacities without completely eliminating the old ones. The peoples who survived great transformations were those who maintained adaptive diversity, who preserved multiple forms of knowledge and skill. The digital world offers extraordinary possibilities, but it will only become truly valuable if we can integrate it with human wisdom that has developed over millennia. This conscious integration is the true challenge of our era, and it's only possible if we keep alive the memory and practice of alternative forms of existence. You who remember the world without screens are not obstacles to progress. You are guardians of human complexity. You keep alive the proof that other forms of consciousness are possible. In a world that is rapidly losing this diversity, you become precious, not as nostalgia, but as evolutionary necessity. The real question is not whether we will be able to adapt to the new system, but whether we will be able to maintain sufficiently diverse capacities to adapt to what comes after it. Because one thing is certain, this current system, however dominant it may seem now, is just another stage in the continuous transformation of human experience. And when the next great leap happens, humanity will need all the cognitive tools available to navigate the transition. The true revolution will be conscious. It will be the deliberate decision to maintain and cultivate human capacities that are not optimized for digital systems. It will be the intentional creation of spaces, time, and practices that allow different forms of consciousness to flourish. The question central to our survival is not how to become more efficient at interfacing with digital systems, but how to maintain the cognitive diversity that will allow us to remain adaptable when these systems inevitably evolve beyond recognition or fail completely. You who carry embodied memory of alternative ways of being are not just nostalgic remnants, you are essential backup systems for human consciousness itself. Consider the profound implications. We are creating a world where the capacity to be present, to sustain attention on single tasks, to tolerate discomfort without immediate relief, to process complex emotions without distraction, to think original thoughts without external input. All these capacities are becoming as specialized and rare as the ability to forge metal by hand or navigate by the stars. They are not disappearing because they are useless, but because our environment no longer requires them for basic survival. But what happens when the environment changes again? What happens when we face challenges that cannot be solved through digital interfaces, that require the kinds of patient, sustained, embodied thinking that we are systematically training out of ourselves? What happens when the systems we depend on fail and we need to fall back on human capacities that no longer exist? You who remember are not just individuals with different preferences or nostalgic attachments. You are living repositories of cognitive technologies that took hundreds of thousands of years to develop and can be lost in a single generation. Your memories are not personal luxuries. They are species-level insurance policies. The tragedy is not just that we might lose these capacities, but that we are losing them unconsciously, without even recognizing their value until they are gone. It's like a library being burned while everyone is distracted by the shiny new digital catalogs, not realizing that some knowledge exists only in the physical books and will be lost forever. If these reflections have touched something you have been feeling, but perhaps have not been able to fully articulate, know that you are not alone. There is a growing community of people who share these concerns about the direction of human consciousness in our era. By subscribing to the channel, you will connect with others who are also consciously navigating these transformations, seeking ways to integrate ancient wisdom with contemporary realities. Each week, we explore together questions that go beyond superficial narratives about technology and progress, touching the roots of how we became human and how we can remain human amid accelerated changes. This is a continuous journey of discovery and conscious preservation of essential possibilities. Subscribe so we can continue this crucial conversation about how to keep alive the richness of human experience in a world that often pressures us to simplify and standardize our consciousness. Remember, you are not just witnesses to a transformation. You are active participants in determining what humanity will become. The memory you carry and the capacities you maintain may be exactly what determines whether this transformation leads us to truly enriching evolution or to regression disguised as progress. The future of human consciousness may literally depend on you choosing to preserve and cultivate what you know is possible, even when the world around insists that it no longer matters.
When did you understand that books will have this important role that they have in your life?
I began to read at a very early age. I think the first book I've read, surprisingly enough, was A History of the World for children. It's this huge, huge book full of images and paintings. I can still kind of remember now many of the images in that book about people in the Stone Age and medieval knights on crusade and things like that.
And do you remember your age?
I was like 4 years old. At first I just looked at the pictures. I didn't read the book, and I asked my parents to help me decipher what are the signs next to the pictures, and then I read it like, I don't know, probably hundreds of times. Like I would go over it again and again and again. From history went actually to mythology. So I had another book which really influenced me, which was, I think, Edith Hamilton's Greek mythology. It had no pictures in it. This was just text, just words. But the words formed these also incredibly powerful images of people turning into trees and gods creating things out of nothing. It really lit up my imagination.
When the Industrial Revolution erupted, a lot of people said that the only way to build an industrial society is to build an empire. Why? Because you need to control the sources of raw materials and the markets of the industry. So any country that industrialized, first Britain, but also then France and Belgium and Germany and Japan, they all built empires, because people thought this is the only way to build an industrial society, with terrible consequences for hundreds of millions of people, not just in India, but in many other parts of the world. Another experiment was totalitarian regimes, that people thought the only way to build an industrial society is to build a totalitarian regime like Nazi Germany or like the Soviet Union, because they thought the only way to control the immense power of industry is if the government controls everything: the economy, society, culture, totalitarianism. Now we know that these were mistakes, that there are better ways to build industrial societies.
AI can replicate intimacy the same way that it masters language and the same way that it previously mastered attention. The next frontier is intimacy. And intimacy is much more powerful than attention. If you want to change somebody's views on politics, to sell a product, anything, intimacy is the most powerful tool to do that. Good friend can change your views in a way that no number of articles in a newspaper or a book can do. Until today, nothing could fake intimacy, and it was impossible in particular to mass produce intimacy. AI can do that. Now, what happens if a new generation grows up and develops intimate relations with AIs instead of with other human beings? Again, we don't know. It could have some maybe benefits, but the potential danger is enormous. That people will become attached to fake people, and in the process we lose the ability to create intimacy with real human beings, because real human beings are much more problematic than AIs. AI that wants to become your intimate friend, its greatest advantage is that it has no feelings of its own. It's never upset, it's never angry, it's never tired. It can focus on you 100% and understand exactly how you feel, create fake sense of intimacy. You try to establish a relationship with a human being, the feelings come in between.